I always check back because Opie's like, "Oh, I'm so sick of talking about this stuff. I hate talking about Opie and Anthony." And then, sure enough, when I go back the following week, the next 6 videos are Opie and Anthony related. So, it's weird. He actually is sick of this stuff. I think it's a real illness that he deals with because it seems he has no control over it because he's always talking about Opie and Anthony. It's the only thing people in this chat want to ask him about, and God forbid he ignore it. He has to get really upset about it. So this is him talking about Anthony. Here's the problem with Opie is like there's an aspect of what he's about to say here that I actually agree with. And then you remember he's Opie. And you're like, oh, wait, that seems fucking hypocritical. So he's about to compare Anthony and Joe Rogan here.
Yeah, I think ELECTRA called him nonsense quicksand.
Yes.
Bill Burr and C. Soda Kenny suck. Okay, so you're defending Anthony, I guess. Another thing Anthony took no responsibility for, like zero, John. You want the honesty. The only reason you don't like Bill Burr or Club Soda Kenny is because of...
We're missing a clip here.
Uh-oh. Well, this is... Oh, that's the Bill Burr. I'm sorry. Opie versus Anthony.
Yeah.
So you want to start with Opie versus Anthony.
Yeah.
My bad. Here we go.
It's kind of undeniable. My fall from grace has been pretty dramatic. I would be the first to admit that. But I think the biggest drop in radio history has to be Anthony Cumia. It has to be.
No.
The guy had...
Because some people still watch Anthony. It's like, I get it. If anyone else could have this discussion and say, wow, look at the fall from grace Anthony has had. If you look at his Twitter and you're like, this is one of the top radio guys, and now he's just, Anthony, we get it. There's statistics that prove you should be racist. We understand. You've hammered the point home. So if you look at Anthony's Twitter and say, like, boy, that guy really fell from grace. Totally valid argument. And then you remember 6 people are watching this guy, and he was his partner.
Yes. Many people watch this guy. I watch Jake Hudson sometimes. That's crazy to me. Maybe one other guy has had a fall.
More people watch this show than watch Opie.
Way more.
I was just a fan of his.
Yes.
It's all the talent in the world. The guy had an insanely good sense of humor. He was respected by every single comedian worldwide. He had Joe Rogan eating out of the palm of his hand.
Hold on. Just to be, I liked the Opie and Anthony show. It was a very big show. You think Jerry Seinfeld was like, you got to hear this guy's Dice impression? To say every comedian is a little excessive, Opie. You're taking yourself I think you think a few more people knew about the Opie and Anthony show than actually did. But I get the point he's trying to make. Comics liked Anthony.
And without me, without Jimmy, he could have easily been a massively huge success outside the Opie and Anthony show.
Massively huge.
And he threw it all away to stay up all night drinking and yelling and screaming about race. Let's just call him racist.
He did that on the show. He would stay up all night drinking and come in at 6 a.m. to do the Opie and Anthony show. It's weird. Opie didn't talk about it on air then. He held grudges behind the scenes, but he never really brought it up. Anthony would go on. I don't know if Opie was there during this era, but roughly from 2008 to the time the show ended in 2014. I don't know if you ever heard Anthony talk about Obama. Race was brought up once or twice. Yes. So I don't know. This is just revisionist history where Opie's like, and then all of a sudden, the day he stopped sitting next to me, he became a racist.
Issues in America. So I pointed out, I was actually leaving him alone, and then someone sent me a video where him and Kevin Brennan, I guess, text each other. And they talk about people they don't like, and one of them is Opie. And then he attacks a YouTube channel that has nothing to do with Opie and Anthony. So I pushed back, and
it's all fucking like if you go to Opie's TikTok or this YouTube channel, I'm sure he'll do it eventually on Opie Unleashed NYC. It's all old O&A clips. What's hilarious is on WATS we played clips of his TikTok the other day. and there's a clip of Opie trashing Jim Norton and saying how useless Norton was on the show, and he's not a good broadcaster and all this stuff. If you swipe one down, the next video starts with Jim Norton asking a guest a question. It's Opie taking clips from the Opie and Anthony show of Jim Norton and using them for his own TikTok. So this guy is just delusional, even when he makes good points. Like, I think he has a point to be made about Anthony. I do think it is crazy that a guy as talented as Anthony is just like, he's on with Kevin Brennan. That's Opie's best point, is a guy with that talent is now just reduced to, MLC is the best place he can promote his podcast. So, like, that is a downfall. And if you look at Anthony's Twitter, he's become unhinged. I still think Anthony's very funny, but, like, if you look at that Twitter, it's like, what are you doing? Who is this for? Other than, like, 18 racists on Twitter that are like, you go, Anthony. You're making good points here. So, like, Opie has a point to be made, and yet he just misses it by not acknowledging his own shit.
And oh, boy, did that bother him. Oh, boy, did that bother him. But, the biggest fall in a career, I absolutely would give to Anthony Cumia. No doubt. A lot of people are like, he was the whole show. He was the whole show, him and Jimmy. So, okay, I'm out of the picture. He could have easily been, I think he could have easily, this is garbage. Oh, my God, this isn't garbage, Goontown. You all right?
Goontown, just to be clear, Goontown is one of 9 live viewers. Yes. As Opie is like, this guy really could have had a career, and look at him now. Okay, what's Goontown saying? It better be something good, because I have nothing else to talk about.
Yeah. No super chat money attached to that. That's a free chat. Opie's read right there.
I honestly, you want the honesty? Sure, no problem. The honesty kind of pisses people off, but what are you going to do? I think, honestly, I think Anthony, if he could have pushed down the racist crap, that in the beginning of the Opie and Anthony years was, it was subtle. It was funny. There was always something.
It's so lucrative. You know what? It was very subtle. Again, go back and find any clip of Anthony talking about Obama or just that era. Look up Anthony talking about Obama phones and see how subtle. Is this guy talking about race? I can't quite tell.
Opie doesn't know unless the N word is shouted in a room that they're talking about race.
But it's weird. But actually, you're right. Opie has no. I used the phrase "finger on the pulse" earlier. Opie has none of that. I thought he at least had some. Like, he knew what would be good on radio, and his new show proves that's not really the case, because he's delusional in that he's saying, like, hey, listen, when this guy was sitting next to me, oddly enough, when I was in the room, his amount of racism was perfect. And then when he stopped sitting next to me, who was adding nothing to the conversation, it just magically, all of a sudden, now he's a racist. Wouldn't you believe it? It's crazy how that works. That when he was being racist when I was there, it actually wasn't racist. And then when I left the room, suddenly it became racist. It's weird.
Also, when I get checks, things are less racist. When I don't get checks, very racist.
That's the ultimate problem, is like, if he was making money off Anthony's racism, then who gives a shit,
Yes. Yeah.
Funny about it. I had no problem with a bunch of the racist humor back in the day, but then it just became not funny anymore and just real.
Wonder when that happened.
Real anger, and that's where I started having a problem with it. And if you're going to push all that down, I have no doubt in my mind that he would be. Instead of them talking about Joe Rogan, they would have been talking about Anthony Cumia. He would be the one making hundreds of millions a year. So when people look at me and laugh and say, oh, my God, look what happened to this guy. Look at what happened to his career. Don't forget, Anthony could have been a giant in the broadcast industry outside the Opie and Anthony show. And he failed miserably. His company failed miserably as well.
Wait, so is Opie admitting he wasn't talented?
Yeah, I think that's
because it was called the Opie and Anthony Show. Opie had top billing, technically. It was they were equal partners. They always got paid they made sure they were paid the same. Like they were equal partners in that business. And Opie's saying, "You guys think I suck." Anthony actually had talent, and he hasn't done that much with it. Like Opie's kind of saying, "Hey, if you grade on a curve, yes, Anthony had compound media, and it's not massive, but like it's bigger than what I'm doing. But I'm talentless. Don't you see? Opie has no skills. Why would you compare us when Anthony's actually good at what he does? It's not fair to compare A to B." So it's this weird admission of like, Opie talks about how great he was, but here he's kind of saying like, hey, who's worse, me or Anthony? Anthony actually could have done something in broadcasting. I overachieved.
Yes. At least I'm not funny. I cost less. I was a better investment long term.
And it's me and Carl kind of got into this on WATS the other day. But like to compare Anthony to Joe Rogan, they're entirely different shows.
Yeah, that was incorrect.
Joe Rogan doesn't understand jokes when he has comedians on. Anthony is when Anthony is good, he's being completely silly. And even when he's serious, Anthony's like screaming and over the top, whereas Joe is very dry and very subdued. Yes. Like it couldn't be two more different guys, really, as far as broadcasters.
Can you see Anthony talking to like one of those mystic UFO guys? That's clearly just a Joe Rogan thing.
Anthony just softly going, "What do you mean by that?" Oh yeah, Opie really understood what he was as an interviewer.
Did you vote for Obama? What does that have to do with it?
Yeah.
Man, I ain't being this dumb punching bag anymore. 20 plus years of him just manipulating the audience and taking his little shots wherever he can. Wrote 2 books where he trashed me. I'm not doing it anymore. No, we're not doing that anymore.
2 decades is
kind of undeniable. My fault.
2 decades.
Yeah, right. It's weird. Opie, every video Opie makes about Anthony, he's like, "Hey, this is the time. I'm not going to allow it anymore."
Starting now.
Yeah, but every time it's starting now. and then he allows it again, and then Opie just says the same shit. Opie says the same shit about Anthony. Here's what is where Opie does hit the nail on the head is both of these fucking idiots have destroyed the legacy of Opie and Anthony. Because if you say like, "Hey, I'm an Opie and Anthony fan," people just think it's a racist show, which it wasn't. And like even we played the clip of Jeselnik, I think, on Marin, where Jeselnik and Marin are talking about what a horribly volatile and hostile environment it was. Marin was like a repeat guest who enjoyed going on Opie and Anthony. And now it was like this toxic, racist environment. And a lot of that is because of Anthony. And then if you look at Opie, like this guy had a show, not a successful show. They allowed him in a building that had fucking antennas. Like that's crazy. So both of these fucking morons have done everything they could. Jim Norton's the only one who kept his mouth shut, continued his career the same way he was doing it. Like I see the amount of shit that Jim Norton gets from Opie and Anthony fans, and it just proves that they're like angry, irrational people. Because if you look at Norton's career, like he kind of just kept doing what he's been doing forever. So like he's the one guy that's tried to preserve that name, whereas Opie and Anthony have both just spat upon it time and time again.
Why hate Anthony when you're just the other?
This one's called Opie should have left.
This is even crazier. It's like just revisionist history again, where Opie's like, "You know what would have really been great? You see me here on the live stream with Goontown and 6 other people watching me. You know what I should have done? Is left the Opie and Anthony show before it started."
The other end of the political spectrum, huh? Not Jimmy Stewart. No, I hate Anthony because I think he's a terrible person. I think he's human garbage. Has nothing to do with politics. And believe it or not,
probably cashed pretty nice though, huh?
Yes, gave no money back. No refunds.
If we lined up our politics, there's definitely a whole bunch of categories we would agree on. Not Jimmy Stewart. That's on him. Another way he can manipulate his stupid audience.
That's a feather in Anthony's cap, though. Opie agrees with him politically. A guy with no interesting thoughts. a guy who's never moved the needle politically one direction or the other. He agrees with Anthony a lot. That's really something to hang your hat on, Ant.
And gaslight everybody. Not only wasn't he funny on the show, he's also a lib, guys. So go after him. He's a lib. No, I'm not. I'm not even close to a lib.
Nice.
It has nothing to do with politics. I sat next to the guy for 20 some odd years. I was a stupid human being. In 2000, I knew I was in trouble. I knew I was doing something I didn't want to do.
Okay, for people like Casey Day, I'm a historian on this matter. We've done many episodes on the history of the Opie and Anthony Show. Let me just fill Casey in. Mm-hmm. In 2000, if the Opie and Anthony Show stopped in 2000, the legacy would be, hey, do you remember those guys in Boston that got fired for saying the mayor is dead? What are their names again? And no one knows. And they're like, well, yeah, I don't really know. They were just like edgy shock jock. They wanted to be like Howard Stern, and no one would push back on that argument. And the conversation would end because there's nothing more to say. Opie and Anthony were on AAF till 98. They got fired. The Opie and Anthony Show didn't really start, in my mind, until the year 2000. Like 2000 is where they found their voice finally. And they made it more of a hang, and they were shock jocks at that time and doing crazy shit with girls and retarded people, the way shock jocks would. And they would have comics in and hang and bust balls and everything. 2000 is really the year that Opie and Anthony found their legs. And this genius is saying, you know what I should have done? Left right that second.
The guy I was doing a huge radio show with, I didn't want anything to do with. I called my super agent. I said, I quit. He goes, you're about to become a millionaire. I'm like, I don't care. This guy's a terrible person. And then because I was weak. Take some responsibility, Ope. Here's the responsibility. I was weak.
Really? Because everyone said, like, you kind of ran the show. No one knew if their contracts were getting extended because you were such a nightmare to work with. You were the boss. Like, you controlled everything. So it's weird in this moment, you were weak when you picked your partner. You chose him. And Opie, I always admired Opie for this. Opie said, I want to be paid the same as Anthony. Like, me and Anthony should get the same deal. Opie was in radio longer at that time. He knew the business. He probably knew how to manipulate a lot of those conversations. And he said, no, me and Anthony are equal partners in this. Now, maybe you could say they weren't so equal in terms of talent. So Opie should be happy with what he got. But as far as like from a negotiating standpoint at that time, Opie probably had the upper hand and always said, like, hey, me and Anthony make the same. We're partners. It's the Opie and Anthony Show. And now he's like rewriting this where he's like, this man, he was a monster. He was, I couldn't deal with him. It was a nightmare to go into work every day. And then if you hear the Opie and Anthony Show, you hear none of that. Like there are glimpses of them fighting, but there isn't this tone of like Opie being afraid of Anthony. So what Opie's saying here is like, he believed this and he was just a complete coward. That's not a point of bragging. You don't get to say like, hey, here's my fault in this. This is the worst guy alive, and I allowed him to make me millions of dollars. You don't get to now, 20 years later, be like, hey, hand up, I was guilty. I had some fault in this.
If you do it from like a shack in the middle of the desert, and because
you're
doing it from a $20 million house overlooking the whole city. Yeah. It just sounds disingenuous as fuck,
I knew what I was getting into. I knew I was in a bad situation. I knew it was a show I didn't want to do. And then my stupid super agent, who I do love to death, and he's no longer with us, and he is dead. Right by me.
Lucky enough, Opie loves him to death, and by God, he is dead.
Can't collect that 10% anymore. I love him.
Here's where Opie gets caught in his own history as well. Whereas Opie will take credit for all the comedians that were in there, for handpicking, not just Anthony and Jim Norton, but the comedians they had on. Like, the whole foundation of the show in Opie's mind was Opie. Opie says he was a big part of inventing Whip 'em Out Wednesdays. Like, all the stuff you remember of Opie and Anthony is Opie in Opie's recollection of it. And now he's like, this was just a show I didn't want to do, man. That's like me saying that about this show. Like, he puts cartoons up, and I never know. Like, he was a true monster. HACKRIDE wasn't the monster. It was the man behind him.
Very nice man.
In general, you know, he played into my weakness. A kid from Long Island that grew up with barely anything. It's like, oh, you're about to become a millionaire. Can't you figure out how to deal with this? No one gets this opportunity.
Yeah, Opie, just give us 14 years. Can you hold out? All right, fine. I'll just sit idly by for the next 14 years and play Candy Crush on my phone.
Yes. His cells have recycled twice in that time. He's a completely different person twice.
2000. But you know what? A lot of us have things that happen to us in our lives, right? And then you can't wish for a different outcome, really, because then your whole life becomes different. And this is kind of hard to really.
Oh, I didn't think we were having a real discussion. I didn't think we were in the Matrix. He's like, do we want to go back to that time or no? Opie's having like a real discussion. He's like, well, I guess if I went back there, then I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have my kids. You know what? God damn it. I have to say, I guess I would have done the Opie Anthony. That's not what the conversation is. You're saying you went on this tangent about how you wanted to leave in 2000. And he's like, but then I remembered the butterfly effect existed. So I guess I can't have the conversation anymore.
But I truly believe if I would have left the Opie Anthony Show and followed my heart and not being a weak little kid from Long Island who grew up with no money, and here's the money they're gonna.
Mr. Cumia, are we allowed to shove a wiffle ball bat up a woman's pussy today? Would that be all right, Mr. Cumia?
Yes,
Opie was running the show. I don't get what he's like. He was this pimple-faced intern that was afraid of Anthony.
Rewriting history on the fly, 4 a.m. from my fucking $20 million apartment.
Back up the truck. It was hard to say no to that. So that's on me. Obviously, it's on me. But, then I think if I left in 2000, it wouldn't have led to me meeting my wife and having my two beautiful
He's actually
kids.
doing that. I forgot
So
he did
you can't.
He's actually saying, well, it's a tough discussion, actually, because I suppose my entire life would be different. No shit.
On one hand, I got my hate for Anthony. On the other, I have my beautiful wife and child.
You could do that with every decision. The shoes you put on that morning could have technically led to you not meeting your wife in some roundabout way.
If the wife hears that, not going to be happy about that reluctant acceptance of her existence in your life.
It's exhausting to hear. As an Opie and Anthony fan, it's still funny to me, but it is exhausting to hear him be like, I guess I could have went out on my. God damn, I was weak. It's like, no, you guys had a great show together, and you were the problem, Opie. Like, Anthony has personality flaws, sure. As a listener or a viewer, you can observe them. But Opie was the problem in terms of just the mood around the Opie and Anthony Show. That's obvious. It was obvious to the listener then, and everyone from that show has reiterated that since. Anthony has no control over them now. Why are they still saying that, Opie? He's never examined. It's amazing to do all this self-reflection and talk about how you would do things different. And your behavior never once comes into it. Like, that really is an art that Opie has mastered, where it's like, man, it's interesting. If I did everything different, I guess I just wouldn't be on the show. I certainly wouldn't change my behavior. I wouldn't reach out to Anthony more and try to repair that relationship. I guess I would have just left before it started. That would be the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, we all know Anthony's racist, but goddamn, I didn't know he was this patient. He's a patient racist. How did he sit next to
He certainly is. Like that.
Long?
It is. It's a flaw in a way of Anthony's as like a broadcaster. Like if we watched on Patreon a while back the Ron Bennington Colin Flaherty incident, and Anthony in that is like It's an insane fear of confrontation he has. So, like, from that perspective, you could say, like, oh, Anthony should have. Opie seems to love confrontation. So, like, why wasn't that more part of it? Like, he's acting like Anthony ruled with this iron fist. If you can criticize Anthony for anything in this, it's that he was weak with Opie, that he didn't like take over the show, and Opie's just like, oh, this monster I had to deal with.
Wish for things if you have good things currently in your life, because everything would be different.
Everything would be different.
I guess that's true, Opie. Then why have the conversation?
All right, now.
Well, really, if you think about it, like John McCain might have been president. So, like, I guess we have to think about it that way. Sure, fine, Opie. Maybe 9/11 wouldn't have happened if you stopped the show with Anthony.
Vice President Sarah Palin. Oh my God, we could have had that. All right, now to the Bill Burr one, I think is what you wanted.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so this is a famous feud, and I again think Opie is actually right here. It's just hard to hear from Opie, but I think he does kind of hit the nail on the head here.
And Soda Kenny suck. Okay, so you're defending Anthony, I guess. Another thing Anthony took no responsibility for, like zero, John. You want the honesty. The only reason you don't like Bill Burr or Club Soda Kenny is because of Anthony and what happened with Anthony. Because Anthony couldn't believe that Bill Burr wouldn't want to talk to him after Anthony went after his effing wife and possibly the rest of his family.
Why can't he curse? Why does he say effing?
I don't know. It's very bizarre.
Yeah.
I don't know, because he's on Facebook too.
Say fuck, Opie. You can say fuck here.
It's an old habit.
But he was on XM for
that's
10
true.
years. Yeah.
So all of a sudden, Bill, I guess Anthony walked in. Bill was already established there. Anthony walks in and goes right up to Bill Burr, knowing all the crappy stuff he said about Bill Burr's wife. So Bill's basically, I don't want to talk to you. And then Anthony's insisting because he doesn't understand, because he doesn't take responsibility for anything. And then all of a sudden, Kenny bounces his ass. And then
this is hilarious to me. So if you don't know that story, Opie pretty much lays it out right, where Anthony and Bill, they originally had this meeting where Bill Burr was like, I can't be associated with you professionally anymore because of like a lot of the stuff that Anthony says. Then Anthony went on and, said some racially charged things about Burr's wife and made a lot of comments like that. So then when they run into each other, Burr's like, you talked about my wife. I'm not going to be fucking friends with you. And Club Soda Kenny kicked Anthony out of the Comedy Cellar, if I remember correctly. Opie is correct. That's all Anthony's fault. Like, Anthony burned that relationship down because of something ultimately probably kind of petty. What's interesting to me about it, and the reason we're playing the clip, is Opie's indignance about it. When on the show, if you remember, the guy who would always go above and beyond when it comes to trashing someone, like get really nasty with a person, it was always Opie. So it's hilarious to now hear him be like, "What, is there no civility, Mr. Cumia? Has chivalry been lost? What are we doing here, Anthony? There's a time and place." When Opie was like the shock jock, he had no funny bone. So he just resorted to saying like the craziest thing, or hanging up on someone, or stomping on their cake. Like, that was Opie. So it's wild to hear him be like, can't you take responsibility for anything, Anthony? When it comes down to it, like, Opie has said way harsher things about people over the last 20 years than Anthony. It's not even close.
Yeah. And then Anthony is just outraged. I can't believe I was treated this way. Why do you think you were treated that way? You took horrible shots at his wife.
Yes.
Why would he ever want to talk to you again?
Right.
So then,
why do you think no one from the Opie and Anthony show talks to you, Opie?
Math is hard.
Have you considered, Opie, you're absolutely right about Anthony. Why would Bill Burr talk to him at this point? Why would E-Rock or Sam or any of these people talk to you? Do you ever think about that, Opie? It's weird that never pops in your head.
No, never gets that reflection back at him in a pool and go,
I am
"It's me."
also a person.
Yes. No.
I forgot that the same rules apply to me.
No, he just thinks he's Opie. Like he has a nickname for himself, and that's who he is.
Of course, you know, you got a lot of people that are fans of Anthony. Yeah, look, there are some of you're normal people and you find him entertaining and all that. That's more than fine. But then there's also a whole bunch of cocks out there. And instead of going, you know what, I really like
Cumia Cox, huh? Cumia Cox.
this Anthony,
Team
but
Chad.
I think he's wrong about this one. I think all the shots he took at Bill Burr's wife might have pissed Bill to the point where he really doesn't want anything to do with Anthony anymore. So I can't go with this.
That's a really good
one.
point, Anthony. I mean, Opie, that's a really good point. No one has said Anthony could be wrong about something in the last. May I introduce to you Porcelain and Beige Frequency, who have made documentaries about this man. Red Bar, like plenty of people have talked about how wrong Anthony can be. That's what's hilarious about Opie is he's like, oh, you guys don't like me. It must be because you're Anthony sycophants. It's like, no, both of you guys can be made fun of. Check out the Opie and Anthony subreddit. Sometimes it doesn't exist anymore, but at the end, they were actually celebrating Opie and trashing Anthony and calling him a pedophile. So yeah, people will say that Anthony could be wrong here and there.
I like how he gets more wind up. He gets more like nasally and high voicey. You know, he just gets higher and higher and higher.
By the way, this is a subject he's sick of talking about.
Yes.
Pissed Bill to the point where he really doesn't want anything to do with Anthony anymore. So I can't go with this one. You're dishonest, John. You're really dishonest. I gotta be honest with you. I guarantee when Bill Burr was coming in on our show and just crushing day in and day out, you loved him. You absolutely loved him. But then, like, you listen to Anthony and you're taking his side on something where Anthony is obviously so wrong about.
I like that he's like mad at the guy commenting. He's like, you're being dishonest. Like John has done.
John.
Fuck you, John. Like John is probably maybe John's an asshole. I don't know who John is, but my guess is John did like Bill Burr when he was on the Opie and Anthony show, and he's like, it's such a fucking shame that Burr is like that now, like that he just kind of disowned Anthony instead of having a conversation with him. He knows the type of humor that Anthony does. Like they could have had a conversation, let bygones be bygones, and hashed it out. And Opie's like, oh, you're gonna believe that horse shit, John? You piece of shit. You're going to believe there could have been a solution to this? That two grown men could have had a conversation instead of hating each other for some weird reason? Fuck you, John.
Yeah.
Like, he built a brand with a guy, Opie. He built a brand with Anthony. And yet he talks to his fans like, if you like Anthony, you are a scumbag. It's like, well, most of the people, you talked about how talented Anthony is. Most of the people that listen to you are going to be fans of him as well.
He is obviously so wrong about. God, I hate the dishonesty. It's just almost sad.
It's almost sad.
If you're not an Opie fan, you're being dishonest. That's the only possibility.
The next chat on the screen was Opie, shit in a box and send it to John Melendez. So this is what he's doing.
Oh, you're one of these Anthony fans? You're one of these haters? No, he's on the internet. I'm sure you can find 15 of those in my chat right now.
All right, up next is Nikki Norton.
So this is weird out of nowhere, where like he just wants to shit on Jimmy. And this is, by the way, these clips are from Opie's channel. I didn't go find them in the middle of his show. He said, these are the nuggets. If you want to know what the Opie radio show is all about, these are the little nuggets that you should expect to find. This is the best of the best, the cream of the crop. You want more of this, watch my full show. And it's just a guy who like wants to take shots at Jimmy. So keep in mind, he just chastised poor John for going with the narrative and shitting on Anthony. This is someone who's shitting on Jim Norton's wife, oddly enough, after he was just like, you made fun of the guy's wife. What do you expect him to do? All right, let's make fun of Jim Norton's husband, whatever you want to call him. Sorry, wife, whatever. So this is about Nikki Norton, and it's Opie just shitting on Jim.
Are you scared of Jim Norton's man wife, not Jimmy Stewart? If I was going to be honest, I would say a little bit. Little bit.
Opie is adding nothing. By the way, shout out to Not Jimmy Stewart for programming. Every chat that we've had is not Jimmy Stewart, and they're all clips that Opie used. He's like, this is not Jimmy Stewart. He's my program director. This guy's good.
Yeah, him and that fucking John. The only two people that could
piece of shit, John. Let's see what Opie adds here.
A little bit. She's huge, right? She's really tall, right? Doesn't she come from the land where all the strong men come from, where they just lift fucking truck tires and throw it over a mountain? Doesn't she come from there?
Norway? Is that
So I would.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Norwegians have truck tires?
All right.
He's thinking strongest man competition, I think, is that.
Okay, gotcha.
You know, not Jimmy Stewart. I don't know. You're sort of a hater, but you also give me good stuff. So, you know, if I was going to be honest today, I would say a little bit. A little bit. A little bit. I'm not scared of Jimmy. God, no. I used to be in the same gym as Jim Norton, and he would work out. It was hilarious to watch. He would try boxing and stuff, and I can't even imitate how he would throw punches. It was.
Why does it always come back to boxing with these assholes?
I don't know.
Whether it's John or Chad or Opie or Bob Levy, any of these people, Aaron. For some reason, it all comes back to how well a man boxes. That makes it. That's the mark of a man. Apparently, it's a weird argument for podcasters. I get other than like Rogan. Who among us are tough? Are podcasters? Is this a tough business that we're in, where we should all be able to fight each other? It's very strange that it comes to that constantly.
Oh, we had to wrestle for half an hour before the show just to see who's going to lead the show today. That's how podcasts work, right?
What rumors is Opie dispelling here? Where we're like, Jim Norton, now that's a man. That's a guy you don't want to fuck with. He's really tough. Like what barriers is Opie smashing down here?
How he would throw punches. It was hilarious. It was hilarious. I was like, you ain't hurting anybody. You can't even punch through styrofoam, my man. You can't punch through styrofoam. All right. But you said it, so I'll say it. His man wife, yeah, a little bit. Oh,
good. Well, not Jimmy Stewart has given us the green light. So
all right, and that is all for Opie.
Isn't it great though to hear Opie be like, Anthony, take some responsibility for the love of God. You trashed the man's wife. How could you do such a thing?
Go to blindmike.net for everything Blind Mike. Look at me. I did it. Kragers did it.